I am Julissa, 32 years old. And for my entire life, my father has told me that the cockpit of a fighter jet is no place for a woman, especially a failure of a daughter like me. But the worst humiliation didn't come from him. It came from Mark, my half-brother, the golden boy he treats like royalty. Right in the middle of a crowded briefing room, vibrating with the arrogant energy of 100 of America's youngest pilots at Nellis Air Force Base, Mark pointed a finger right in my face. He laughed, loud and sharp, and shouted, "Hey, you're in the wrong room, sweetie. This is for real pilots, men like us. It's not a place for you to find a husband." The entire auditorium exploded in laughter. Mark winked at me, convinced he had just scored a point. I felt the blood rush to my face, burning hot, not from shame, but from pity for his ignorance. Because Mark had no idea that the woman he just humiliated for looking for a husband was holding the call sign Falcon 1. I was the only person with the authority to order him to live or die in the sky today. Before we continue, let me know in the comments which state you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button right now if you want to see an arrogant brat get taught a lesson he will never forget by the very person he despises. The air inside the main briefing room at Nellis Air Force Base always smelled the same. It was a stale mixture of recycled air conditioning, trying and failing to fight off the Nevada desert heat, combined with the sharp scent of burnt government-issue coffee and the overwhelming musk of testosterone. It was the first day of Red Flag, the premier air-to-air combat training exercise in the world. The room was packed. Rows of theater-style seats were filled with the best and brightest, or at least the loudest, young fighter pilots the Air Force had to offer. They were all wearing their green flight suits, zippers pulled to the perfect height, patches gleaming on their shoulders. They were talking with their hands, mimicking dogfights, laughing too loud, posturing. It was a sea of egos, and I was just a rock they were flowing around. I stood near the front, off to the side, near the water cooler. I was wearing a sterile, unadorned flight suit, no name tag, no rank insignia on my shoulders, no unit patches, just plain olive drab green. To the untrained eye or the arrogant eye, I looked like support staff. Maybe intelligence, maybe administration, maybe just someone lost. I held a styrofoam cup of lukewarm water, watching them. I observed the way they moved, the way they grouped together in little tribes of confidence. They looked at me, and then they looked right through me. To them, a woman in this room without a visible rank was invisible. She was furniture. Then the double doors at the back swung open, and the volume in the room seemed to shift. Lieutenant Mark Wyatt walked in. My half-brother. Even from across the room, he looked exactly like our father. He had that same square jaw, that same perfectly styled blonde hair that defied the helmet hair regulations, and that same swagger that said he owned the building. He was flanked by two other pilots, his wingmen in the bar, if not in the air. He was laughing at something one of them said, slapping him on the back. He looked like the poster child for a recruitment commercial. He scanned the room, looking for a prime seat, and his eyes landed on me. He stopped. A confused frown creased his forehead, and then it smoothed out into a smirk that made my stomach turn. He didn't see a captain. He didn't see a veteran. He saw his failed big sister. He nudged his buddy and walked straight toward me, his voice cutting through the ambient chatter. "Julissa," he said, loud enough for the first 5 rows to hear. The chatter died down. Heads turned. "What are you doing in here? Did you get lost looking for the admin building?" I didn't move. I kept my face neutral, my hands resting loosely by my sides. "Hello, Mark," I said, my voice even. He chuckled, shaking his head as if he was dealing with a slow child. "Seriously, Jules, this is the red flag briefing, the big leagues. Did Dad send you to drop off my lunch or something?" He stepped closer, invading my personal space, pointing a finger at the door. "You need to clear out, sweetie. We're about to talk tactics. Real flying stuff. Not the paperwork Dad said you were better suited for." He turned to the room, spreading his arms wide, performing for his audience. "My sister, everyone. Looks like she's trying to find a husband since the flying career didn't work out." The room erupted. It wasn't just a few chuckles. It was a roar of laughter. 100 men, fueled by adrenaline and pack mentality, jeering at the woman standing alone by the water cooler. Mark winked at me, a cruel, dismissive gesture. "Go on now," he said, waving his hand as if shooing a fly. "Maybe you can grab us some fresh coffee on your way out. This pod is empty." The heat rose in my neck. My heart hammered against my ribs, a physical reaction to the public flaying. I felt the weight of their eyes, the dismissal, the sheer injustice of it. My fingers curled inward, nails digging into my palms inside my pockets. I wanted to scream. I wanted to list my flight hours. I wanted to break his nose, but I didn't. I took a breath, slow and deep, expanding my diaphragm just like I did before a high G turn. I closed my mind to the noise. I remembered the worn pages of my Bible, the verse I'd highlighted in yellow marker years ago, back when I first started flight school and realized how hard this road would be. Proverbs 12:16 I recited in my head, the words forming a shield around my temper. A fool shows his annoyance at once, but a prudent man overlooks an insult. Or in this case, a prudent woman. I unclenched my jaw. I looked Mark dead in the eye. I didn't step back. I didn't look down. I just looked at him with a cold, flat stare that usually unsettled people. But Mark was too drunk on his own ego to notice. "Are you done, Lieutenant?" I asked softly. "Just trying to help you save face, Jules," he sneered. Suddenly, the door at the front of the room, the one reserved for command staff, slammed open. The sound cracked like a gunshot. "Room 10 hut," a voice bellowed. The laughter died instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The sound of 100 bodies snapping to attention filled the air, the rustle of flight suits and the stomping of boots. Mark stiffened, his smirk vanishing, his eyes darting to the front. General Harris walked in. He was a legend in the Air Force, a man with silver hair and a face carved from granite, wearing 3 stars on his shoulders. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at the projector screen. He walked with a purpose, his boots echoing on the linoleum floor. He walked straight toward us. Mark puffed out his chest, preparing to greet the general, a desperate look of "notice me" in his eyes. He started to raise his hand for a salute. "General, I was just..." General Harris didn't even blink at him. He walked right past Mark as if he were a ghost. He stepped directly in front of me. The entire room held its breath. Mark looked confused, his hand hovering halfway up, his mouth slightly open. General Harris stopped. He looked me up and down, his eyes sharp and respectful. Then, slowly, deliberately, the 3-star general raised his hand and rendered a crisp, perfect salute. "Falcon 1, the general said, his voice carrying to the back of the silent room. "The floor is yours. Give them hell." I returned the salute, sharp and professional. "Thank you, General." I dropped my hand and looked at Mark. All the color had drained from his face. He looked like he had just been punched in the gut. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The realization was washing over him, slow and terrifying. I didn't say a word to him. I didn't need to. I turned my back on him and walked up the steps to the podium, taking my place at the center of the stage. I looked out at the sea of faces, the same faces that had been laughing 10 seconds ago. Now they looked terrified. I picked up the microphone. "Take your seats," I ordered. The sound of 100 men sitting down simultaneously was the only response. "I am Major Julissa Wyatt. My call sign is Falcon 1. I am the Red Air Mission Commander." I paused, letting the silence stretch, letting Mark sweat in it. "And for the next 2 weeks, I am the one who decides if you survive up there." That salute from General Harris felt like a warm sun after a long, cold winter. It was the kind of respect I'd starved for my entire life. But as I stood there on that podium, looking down at Mark's pale, terrified face, my mind didn't stay in the moment of victory. Instead, it drifted back 2 weeks. It went back to the moment that fueled the fire burning in my chest right now. It went back to a dinner table at the Prime Cut, one of the most expensive steakhouses in Las Vegas, where the air smelled of aged beef, expensive cologne, and my father's suffocating expectations. The restaurant was dimly lit, the kind of place where the booths are made of dark mahogany and leather, and the waiters wear tuxedos. We were there to celebrate Mark. Of course. He had just received his slot for red flag, the same exercise I was secretly commanding. But to my family, Mark was the hero, and I was the spectator. My father, Colonel Rhett Wyatt, retired, sat at the head of the table like a king holding court. He swirled a glass of Napa Valley Cabernet, the red liquid catching the candlelight. He looked at Mark with a pride so intense it was almost painful to watch. "To Mark," my father announced, raising his glass. His voice was booming, attracting glances from nearby tables. "The next generation, the one who will finally carry the Wyatt name back into the stratosphere. To the legacy." "To the legacy," my stepmother echoed. She took a dainty sip of her wine, then turned her gaze to me. It wasn't a look of hatred, it was worse, it was pity. A soft, condescending smile that said, "It's okay, dear, we know you tried." I raised my glass of water, I wasn't drinking, and murmured, "To Mark." Mark was beaming. He cut into his bone-in ribeye, cooked perfectly medium rare, juices pooling on the white ceramic plate. "Thanks, Dad," he said, mouth half full. "Wait until you see the bird I'm flying. The F-35 is a beast. The avionics alone, it flies itself practically. I'm going to run circles around those aggressor squadrons." I tightened my grip on my fork. Those aggressor squadrons. He was talking about my unit. He was talking about me. "That's great, son," Dad said, leaning forward. Then, as if remembering social obligation required him to acknowledge my existence, he turned his head slightly toward me. "And you, Julissa, how are things at the office?" He always called it the office, as if I worked in a cubicle filing tax returns. "Actually, Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "work is intense. We've been developing new tactical scenarios for the Red Air Team, simulating fifth-generation threats using the..." He waved his hand, cutting me off mid-sentence. All right, let's not bore Mark with the administrative details. It's good you're safe on the ground, Jules. Really." He took another sip of wine, his eyes hardening. "Paperwork is safer for women. Your mother, she never understood that. She always had to push, had to be in the cockpit. And look where that got her." The table went silent. The mention of my mother, who died serving her country, a pilot far better than my father ever was, hung in the air like smoke. He wasn't mourning her. He was using her death to justify his disappointment in me. He was saying, "You are a mistake, just like she was." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "She was a hero, Dad." "She was stubborn," he corrected coldly. Then the mask of the jovial father returned. He reached under the table. "Enough about the past. We have gifts." He pulled out a heavy rectangular box wrapped in velvet. He slid it across the white tablecloth to Mark. Mark tore into it like a kid on Christmas morning. He opened the box and gasped. Inside sat a Breitling Navy timer, the ultimate pilot's chronograph. Steel case, black dial, intricate slide rule bezel. It was an $8,000 watch, a symbol, an heirloom. "Dad," Mark stammered, putting it on his wrist. "This is... wow." "You earned it," Dad said, beaming. "A pilot needs a real watch. Wear it when you break the sound barrier." Then Dad turned to me. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thin, white envelope. He slid it across the table. It was light, meaningless. "Didn't forget you, Jules," he said casually. I opened the envelope. Inside was a plastic gift card. I pulled it out. It was for a grocery store chain. Whole Foods. The amount written in Sharpie on the back was $50. I stared at it. A $50 gift card for groceries. The contrast was so violent it felt like a physical slap. $8,000 and a legacy for the son. $50 and a suggestion to go buy milk for the daughter. It wasn't about the money. I made a major's salary. I didn't need his money. It was the message. The watch said, "I believe in your future." The gift card said, "I pity your present." "Thanks, Dad," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "It's practical." "Gotta eat, right?" Mark laughed, admiring his new watch. "Maybe you can buy some of that organic kale you like." This is the moment where I felt something break inside me. It is a pain that is hard to describe unless you have felt it yourself. If you are listening to this and you have ever been the child who was overlooked, the one who was never enough, no matter how hard you tried, I need you to know you are not alone. Please hit that like button right now to show that we are stronger than their neglect. And in the comments, I want you to simply write, "I am worthy." Let's create a wall of support for everyone who has ever received the gift card treatment while someone else got the gold. I couldn't sit there anymore. The smell of the steak was suddenly making me nauseous. The sound of their laughter felt like sandpaper on my skin. "Excuse me," I said, standing up abruptly. "Restroom." I didn't wait for a response. I walked quickly past the other tables, past the happy families and the business deals, and pushed into the ladies' room. It was quiet in there. The floor was black and white tile, pristine and cold. I gripped the edge of the marble sink, my knuckles turning white. I stared at my reflection in the expansive mirror. I looked for my father in my face, but I didn't see him. I saw her. I saw the sharp eyes of my mother. I saw the jawline that didn't know how to quit. I turned on the faucet, letting the cold water run over my wrists. I didn't cry. Crying was for the girl who wanted her daddy's approval. That girl died at the dinner table tonight. They don't know, I whispered to my reflection, the sound bouncing off the tiled walls. They think I'm a secretary. They think I'm weak. I dried my hands on a paper towel, my movements slow and deliberate. I thought about the mission briefing scheduled for 2 weeks from now. I thought about the flight roster I had already approved. I thought about the call sign Falcon 1. I tossed the paper towel into the trash bin. It hit the bottom with a soft thud. "Enjoy the watch, Mark," I said to the empty room. "Because in 2 weeks, time runs out." I straightened my blazer, fixed a loose strand of hair, and walked back out to the dining room. I sat down, finished my water, and watched them celebrate. I didn't say another word. I didn't have to. I knew something they didn't. The check was coming, and eventually, everyone has to pay. That reflection in the restaurant bathroom mirror, the one framed by warm golden light and expensive tile, faded from my mind. It was replaced by a different kind of reflection, one I knew far better. It was the ghostly, pale reflection of my own face staring back at me from a black computer monitor in a windowless room deep beneath the Nevada desert. They called it the Vault. It was a sensitive compartmented information facility, or a CIF. It smelled of ozone, burnt wiring, and the distinct metallic scent of loneliness. There were no windows, no clocks, and the only sound was the low, constant hum of server banks, cooling down the massive supercomputers that ran the war simulations. This had been my home for the last 3 years. This was where Julissa Wyatt died and where Falcon 1 was built from the ashes. It started with the incident. The memory still tasted like copper in my mouth. 3 years ago, I was on the fast track. I was flying F-16s, logging hours, keeping my head down. Then came a routine training sortie with Kyle Ripper Vance. Kyle was everything the Air Force loved: loud, confident, and male. During a close formation maneuver, Kyle drifted. He got sloppy. He breached the safety bubble, nearly clipping my wing. To save us both, I broke formation hard, over-G'ing the aircraft and damaging the airframe. On the tarmac, I expected an apology. Instead, I got an ambush. Kyle told the commander I'd panicked. He said I got emotional and erratic in the air. "She just flinched, sir," he said with a shrug, that casual betrayal that men like him practice so easily. Maybe it was that time of the month. The commander didn't check the flight data recorder. He didn't interview the ground crew. He just nodded. It was the old boys club closing ranks. I was grounded pending an investigation that never really happened. I was labeled a flight risk. But the worst part wasn't losing my wings. It was the phone call to my father. I remember standing by the payphone outside the hangar, fighting back tears, explaining that I had been washed out of the squadron. I waited for him to get angry at them. I waited for him to demand justice. Instead, I heard a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. "See?" Rhett Wyatt said, his voice void of surprise. I told you, Julissa. Biology is biology. The cockpit is a pressure cooker. You weren't built for the heat. Come home, maybe we can find you a job in logistics. That, I told you so, broke something in me. But it didn't break me down. It broke me open. I refused to quit. If they wouldn't let me fly with them, I would learn how to kill them. I requested a transfer to the aggressors, the red team, the bad guys, the pilots who studied enemy tactics to train the good guys. It was considered a dead-end job for washouts and misfits. I treated it like a doctorate program in warfare. For 3 years, I lived in the vault. I stopped going to the officers' club. I stopped dating. I stopped eating real meals, surviving on vending machine crackers and lukewarm energy drinks that tasted like battery acid. I worked 18-hour days. I didn't just learn to fly the enemy jets in the simulator. I learned to think like them. I taught myself to read technical Russian so I could understand the Sukhoi flight manuals in their original language. I memorized the radar cross-section of every fighter jet in the U.S. arsenal. I learned their blind spots. I learned that American pilots, especially the young hotshots like Mark, suffered from a specific fatal flaw: arrogance. They trusted their technology too much. They assumed they were invincible. I became a predator. I sat in that dark room, my face illuminated by the blue glow of tactical maps, designing scenarios that were nightmares. I wasn't just a pilot anymore. I was an architect of doom. I learned how to bait them, how to frustrate them, how to make them angry. Because an angry pilot makes mistakes. One night, or maybe it was early morning, time didn't exist in the vault. I was running a solo simulation. It was 03 a.m. I was controlling a flight of 4 digital Su-57s against a squadron of 12 F-35s. The odds were impossible. That was how I liked it. My fingers flew across the keyboard and the throttle controls. I wasn't panicked. I was in a flow state, cold and precise. I used one of my digital jets as a rabbit, a decoy, dragging the blue team into a surface-to-air missile trap. Then, I flanked them. One by one, the good guys disappeared from the screen. Splash 1, splash 2, splash 3. I wiped the kill board clean. 12 American jets down, 0 losses for me. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my burning eyes, exhaling a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Run it again," a voice said from the shadows behind me. I jumped, spinning my chair around. Standing there, holding a styrofoam cup of coffee, was General Harris. I hadn't heard him come in. He was wearing his service dress blues, probably coming back from some late-night meeting in D.C. He was looking at my screens with an intensity that unsettled me. "General," I stammered, starting to stand up to salute. "Sit down, Major," he ordered, waving a hand. He walked closer, looking at the simulation logs. "You just wiped out an entire squadron in under 8 minutes using inferior aircraft. How?" "They were aggressive, sir," I said, my voice raspy from disuse. "They chased the kill. They didn't check their six. I gave them what they wanted to see, and then I hit them from where they weren't looking." The general nodded slowly. He looked around the small, cramped room. He saw the empty energy drink cans, the stacks of Russian manuals, the sleeping bag rolled up in the corner. He saw the obsession. He saw the scar tissue over the wound my father and the system had inflicted. "They say you're a washout, Wyatt," Harris said, looking me in the eye. "They say a lot of things, sir." "They're wrong," he said. He took a sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving mine. "You aren't a dogfighter, Major. You're a grandmaster. You don't fly the jet, you fly the entire chessboard." He placed his hand on the back of my chair. "Red flag starts in 2 weeks. I'm firing the current Red Air Commander. He's too soft. He lets the blue team win to make them feel good." My heart stopped. "I want you to run the show," Harris said. "I want you to break them. I want you to humble them. Can you do that?" I thought of Mark. I thought of my father's "I told you so." I thought of every man who had ever looked through me. "I can bury them, sir," I said. The general smiled. It was a wolfish, dangerous smile. "Good. Your new call sign isn't Sweetheart or whatever garbage they called you. From now on, you're Falcon 1. You have kill authority." He turned and walked out of the darkness, leaving me alone with the hum of the computers. But the room didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like a cockpit. And for the first time in years, I was ready for takeoff. 2 weeks later, I walked out of the blinding Nevada sunlight and into the cool, pressurized darkness of the Battle Management Command and Control Center. We called it the cage. If the vault was where I designed the nightmares, the cage was where I unleashed them. The room hummed with a different kind of energy than the briefing room. Upstairs, it was all ego and posturing. Down here, it was pure competence. The air smelled of ozone, floor wax, and the sugary glaze of a half-eaten box of Dunkin' Donuts sitting on the central console. It was the smell of work. As I swiped my badge and stepped onto the operations floor, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't fear. I didn't rule by fear. It was readiness. Mike Sarge Peterson was the first to see me. Mike was a 60-year-old retired master sergeant who had been reading radar scopes since Operation Desert Storm. He was a man who had seen everything, a man who had zero patience for officers who didn't know their job. He sat at the main radar console, his face illuminated by the amber sweep of the scope. He stood up immediately. He didn't have to. He was a civilian contractor now. But he stood. "Morning, boss," Mike said, his voice gravelly and warm. "Morning, Mike. How's the board looking?" "Picture is clean, ma'am. All sensors are green. Data link is up." Before I could reach the command chair, Mike extended a hand. In it was a styrofoam cup of black coffee. Scorching hot, no sugar, no cream. Just the way I drank it. I took the cup, feeling the warmth seep into my cold fingers. I paused for a second, the irony washing over me. 2 weeks ago, my brother had told me to fetch coffee for the real men. Today, a man who had forgotten more about aerial combat than Mark would ever learn was serving me coffee. Not because I was a woman, not because I was a Wyatt, but because I was the mission commander. "Thanks, Mike," I said. "You're gonna need it," he grunted, sitting back down. Blue Air is taxiing. They sound enthusiastic. I moved to the center of the room, to the elevated platform that gave me a view of every screen. Sarah, my lead intel analyst, was already typing furiously at her station. Sarah was 24, a wizard with electronic warfare data. She could look at a jumbled mess of radio waves and tell you what the pilot had for breakfast. "Good morning, Major," Sarah said, not looking up from her keyboard. Her fingers were a blur. "I've loaded the threat libraries you requested. We're simulating SA-20 radar signatures today. High altitude, long range, nasty stuff." "Good work, Sarah," I said, taking my seat. I put on my headset, the foam cups sealing out the ambient hum of the servers. I adjusted the microphone. "Listen up, everyone." The room went silent. Every head turned slightly towards me, every ear listening. "Today isn't just a training sortie," I said, my voice calm but projecting to every corner of the room. "We have 100 young pilots up there who think the F-35 makes them invincible. They rely on their stealth. They rely on their sensors. They think the machine makes the man." I took a sip of the bitter coffee. "Our job today isn't to kill them. Not yet. Our job is to strip them naked. We are going to jam their comms. We are going to flood their scopes with ghost targets. We are going to separate the flight leads from their wingmen. We are going to teach them humility." "Copy that, boss," Mike said, cracking his knuckles. "Humility is my specialty." "Sarah," I asked, "patch me into the Blue Air frequency, passive monitoring only. I want to hear what they're saying before the fight starts." "Patching you in now," Sarah said. A burst of static filled my headset, followed by the crisp, overly confident voices of the Blue Force pilots. They were chatting on the tactical frequency, a violation of radio discipline, but they didn't care. They were the Wyatts, or at least the team led by one. "Check out that sunrise, boys," a voice said. I recognized it instantly. It was Mark. Even through the digital distortion of the radio, his arrogance was unmistakable. "Looks like a good day for a turkey shoot. I bet the red team is still waking up." "You think they sent the B team today, Viper?" another pilot asked. Viper was Mark's call sign. "Of course it was. Cliché." Mark laughed. "Doesn't matter who they sent. Dad's watching from the observation deck today. I'm gonna bag 3 bandits before lunch. Just stay out of my way and watch the masterwork. My hand tightened around the armrest of my chair. The mention of my father watching, of course he was there. He wasn't there to watch the exercise, he was there to watch Mark's coronation. Sarah turned in her chair, pulling one ear cup away. She looked at me with wide, hesitant eyes. She knew who Mark was. Everyone on base knew the rumors about the Wyatt siblings. Major. Sarah hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper so the others wouldn't hear. Isn't that your brother? Lieutenant Wyatt? I looked at Sarah. I saw the concern in her eyes. She was worried that I might be compromised. She was worried that I might go easy on him, or worse, that I might let my emotions cloud my judgment. I looked up at the main tactical display. The massive screen on the wall showed the entire Nevada test and training range. To the south, a cluster of blue symbols was pushing north. To the north, my red force, 4 aggressor F-16s painted in black and gray camouflage, were orbiting in a holding pattern, waiting for my command. Sarah, I said, my voice flat, devoid of any warmth, look at that screen. What do you see? She blinked. Blue force, ma'am. 4 F-35s. Exactly, I said. I see 4 aircraft. I see heat signatures. I see radar cross-sections. In this room, Sarah, I don't have a brother. I don't have a father. I have targets. And right now, that lead target is flying sloppy. Sarah straightened up, her expression hardening into professionalism. She nodded once. Understood, boss. Mike, I called out. What's the status of my Red Air flight? Red flight is on station, Major. They're thirsty. Lead pilot is asking for permission to engage. I checked the time. It was 18 hours exactly. Rules of engagement are active, I said into the microphone, my voice broadcasting to my pilots in the air and my team in the room. Red lead, this is Falcon 1. You are cleared to commit. Execute Plan Alpha. Separate the leader from the pack. Make him think he's alone out there. Falcon 1, red lead copies. Fights on. On the big screen, the red symbols turned south, accelerating. They moved like a pack of wolves descending on a lost sheep. The blue symbols kept drifting north, oblivious, chatting about the sunrise, completely unaware that the ground beneath them had just shifted. I leaned back in my chair, watching the geometry of the battle form. Mark was up there, soaring in the expensive jet my father loved more than me, wearing the watch that cost more than my car. He thought he was the main character of this story. But down here, in the dark, surrounded by the people who actually respected me, I held the pen. Mike, I said softly, jam their data link. With pleasure, boss. The electronic warfare suite activated. Up in the sky, Mark's fancy displays were about to start lying to him. The game had officially begun. The radar screen in front of me was a sea of black, punctuated by the glowing geometry of war. From my elevated chair in the cage, I watched the digital representation of the Nevada desert. To the uninitiated, it looked like a video game. To me, it was a psychological profile of every pilot in the sky. And right now, the profile for Viper 1, Lieutenant Mark Wyatt, was flashing red with narcissist. Red lead, execute maneuver Delta, I murmured into my headset. Dangle the carrot. On the screen, one of my aggressor F-16s broke formation. It flew slow and low, banking lazily to the west, acting like a wounded bird separated from its flock. It was the oldest trick in the book. A disciplined pilot would ignore it, stick to the mission package, and maintain air superiority coverage. A disciplined pilot would know that a lone, slow target in a high-threat environment is never actually alone. But Mark wasn't disciplined. He was hungry. Tally-ho! Mark's voice crackled over the speakers, loud and distorted by adrenaline. I've got a visual on a bandit. Single ship, low 9 o'clock. He looks lost. Viper 1, stay in formation. His wingman, a nervous-sounding lieutenant named Miller, pleaded. We have a mission objective to cover the bombers. Screw the bombers, Mark snapped. I'm not letting a free kill fly away. I'm engaging. I watched the blue symbol representing Mark's F-35 peel away from his flight group. He hit the afterburners, diving toward my decoy. He was chasing glory. He was thinking about the kill count he could brag about at the bar tonight. He was thinking about our father, who was undoubtedly watching the telemetry feed from the VIP observation deck, nodding in approval at his son's aggressive instincts. Mark didn't see the trap. He didn't see the two other red F-16s lurking in the radar shadow of the canyon walls, invisible to his sensors because he was too focused on the easy kill. He was flying blind, guided only by his ego. "Sarah," I said, keeping my voice calm, "give me the threat assessment." "He's flying right into a simulated SA-20 kill box, boss," Sarah replied, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "And he's got 2 bandits closing on his 6 o'clock. He's dead in 30 seconds. I had a choice. I could let him die now. I could let my pilots light him up, turning his expensive stealth fighter into digital confetti. It would be satisfying. It would prove I was right. But it would be too easy. If he died now, he would make excuses. He would say his sensors malfunctioned, or the simulation was rigged, or he was just unlucky. My father would back him up. "Bad luck, son. You'll get them next time." No. I didn't want him to just lose. I wanted him to be humiliated, and for that I needed him to think he was winning. I needed to inflate his ego until it was so big that when it finally popped, the sound would shatter the windows. But I still had a job to do. I was the safety observer as well as the mission commander. I reached for the switch on my console that activated the voice modulator. It deepened my voice, stripping it of gender and identity, turning me into the anonymous voice of God. "Viper 1, I broadcasted on the guard frequency, the emergency channel everyone monitored. You are entering a high-threat zone, multiple SAM indications. Bandit ambush imminent, abort run, return to formation." There was a pause. For a second, I thought he might listen. I thought maybe, just maybe, the training would override the arrogance. Then, Mark keyed his mic. "Command, get off the channel. I've got a tone. I don't need some paper pusher telling me how to fly my jet. I see the target. I'm taking the shot." Paper pusher. The insult hung in the cool air of the control room. Beside me, Mike stiffened. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. He knew exactly who that paper pusher was. He waited for me to explode. He waited for me to scream into the mic, to reveal myself, to ground Mark right there and then. I didn't blink. I didn't raise my voice. I looked at the screen. Mark was now deep inside the trap. My 2 hidden aggressors had locked onto him. They had a perfect firing solution. "Fox 2 solution acquired," my red lead pilot reported in my ear. "I have him dead to rights, Falcon 1. Request permission to kill." I watched the geometry on the screen. Mark was lining up his shot on the decoy. He was seconds away from his victory. "Negative," I said. My voice was ice. "Hold fire." Mike swiveled in his chair. "Boss, he's wide open. They can splash him right now." I said hold fire, I repeated. "Let him take the shot. Let him get the kill." "But why?" Mike asked, confused. "He broke rules. He insulted you." "If we kill him now, he learns nothing," I said, staring at Mark's blue dot. "He needs to believe he's untouchable. He needs to believe his own hype. Let him have his little victory. Let him think he's a god for 15 more minutes. Because when I finally swat him out of the sky, I want him to know it wasn't bad luck. I want him to know it was me." On the screen, Mark fired. Fox 2, splash 1 bandit," he screamed in triumph. The decoy aircraft acknowledged the hit and turned off its transponder, signaling it was destroyed. Mark pulled his jet into a steep, vertical climb, a victory maneuver that burned precious fuel and bled off all his energy. It was a rookie move. It was a showboat move. "Did you see that, boys?" Mark crowed on the radio. "That's how you clear the skies. 1 down, 3 to go." He had no idea. He had no idea that my 2 assassins were flying silently just 2 miles behind him, their radars in standby mode, tracking him with infrared search and track systems. He had flown through the death zone 3 separate times in the last 60 seconds. By all rights, he was a ghost. "All red units," I commanded softly. "Fade. Disengage. Let him go home." My pilots peeled away, disappearing back into the digital noise. Mark turned his jet toward the base, unaware that he was only alive because I allowed it. He thought he was a predator. He didn't realize he was just a mouse that the cat had decided to play with for a little while longer. "Sarah," I said, taking off my headset. "Save the tape. Save the audio of him refusing the safety order. Save the telemetry showing he was locked up by 3 different missiles." "Saved and encrypted, boss," Sarah said, a small knowing smile playing on her lips. "Good," I said, standing up. "He's going to land now. He's going to walk into that debriefing room like he owns the place. He's going to tell Dad how great he is." I looked at the blank screen where the battle had just raged. "Let him enjoy the sunset," I whispered, "because tomorrow I bring the storm." The third day of Red Flag dawned with the kind of violence only the Nevada desert knows how to produce. The sky wasn't blue, it was a bruised purple, heavy with dust and static. The wind was howling across the tarmac at 40 knots, whipping sand against the hangars like buckshot. In the briefing room that morning, the safety officer had been crystal clear. "The weather is marginal. The hard deck is raised to 10,000 feet AGL. If you go below 10,000 feet, you are dead. No exceptions." The hard deck is an imaginary floor in the sky. Below that line, we pretend the ground exists. It's there to keep adrenaline junkie pilots from slamming into mountains while chasing a kill. Violating the hard deck isn't just a rule break, it's a firing offense. But Mark didn't care about safety briefs. He cared about the VIP observation deck. He knew our father, Rhett, was sitting up there with the brass, sipping coffee and watching the telemetry feed. Mark treated the airspace like his personal stage, and today, he decided to improvise. I sat in the cage, my eyes glued to the main scope. The turbulence was bad. Even down here in the bunker, I could feel the tension. On the screen, the data blocks representing the jets were jittering as they fought the crosswinds. "Viper 1, I heard Mark's voice, sounding strained but cocky. "I've got a bandit on my tail, taking evasive action, going vertical." "Negative, Viper 1, his wingman called out. "Watch your altitude. We are close to the floor." I got it, Mark snapped. "Watch this." On my screen, Mark's F-35 inverted. He pulled the nose down, diving straight toward the jagged peaks of the testing range. He was trying to shake Spike, one of my best Red Air pilots flying an F-16. Spike was sticking to him like glue, following him down, waiting for the hard deck alarm to force a reset. "Altitude, Viper 1, I warned over the safety frequency. "You are approaching the hard deck. Level off." Mark ignored me. He kept diving. 9,000 feet, 8,000. He was breaking the rules. He was showing off for Dad. "He's going below," Mike whispered beside me, his knuckles white on the desk. "Spike," I keyed my mic. "Disengage. He's crazy. Pull up." "Copy, Falcon 1. Breaking off," Spike replied. My pilot, Spike, did the right thing. He leveled his wings to pull out of the dive. But Mark didn't pull up. Instead, he pulled a high G barrel roll, a flashy, desperate maneuver right into Spike's flight path. It happened in a heartbeat. The proximity alarms in the cage screamed. The screen flashed a collision warning. On the telemetry, the 2 blue and red dots merged into one. Break right, I screamed into the mic, shattering my own composure. In the air, Spike saw the belly of Mark's F-35 fill his entire canopy. It was a wall of gray metal moving at 600 miles per hour. Spike didn't think. He reacted. He slammed his stick to the side and yanked it back, pulling 9 Gs, 9 times the force of gravity. His body was crushed into his seat, his vision graying out, as his jet shuddered and rolled violently away. Mark passed mere feet from Spike's cockpit. The wake turbulence from his engine hit Spike's jet like a physical hammer, flipping the F-16 upside down. Silence hung in the control room. We all waited for the explosion. We waited for the fireball on the screen. Then Spike's voice came over the radio, breathless and shaking. "Holy. Falcon 1, I'm okay, recovering control. That was too close. We swapped paint." He was alive, but he was terrified. I let out a breath that felt like it tore my lungs. My hands were trembling. That wasn't a simulation. That was death knocking on the door. Then Mark's voice cut through the silence. "Hey! Watch where you're flying, idiot!" Mark yelled, his voice full of adrenaline and misplaced rage. "You cut me off. You almost scratched my jet. Learn how to fly or get out of my airspace." He wasn't apologizing. He wasn't checking on the man he almost killed. He was blaming the victim. He was angry that Spike's near-death experience had ruined his cool maneuver. This right here. This is the moment that makes your blood boil. We have all met someone like Mark, someone who sets the house on fire and then blames you for the smoke. It is the ultimate form of gaslighting. If you have ever had to deal with a toxic person who refuses to take responsibility for the damage they cause, I need you to hit that like button right now. Let's show them that we see through their lies. And in the comments, I want you to type accountability. Just one word. Let's demand it. Something inside me didn't just break, it solidified. The sister who wanted to teach her little brother a lesson vanished. The major who wanted to protect her pilots took over. I ripped the headset off my ears and threw it onto the console. The plastic cracked, but I didn't care. I stood up, my chair screeching against the floor. Every head in the room turned to me. They saw the fire in my eyes. They saw the Falcon my father said never existed. I leaned over the master microphone, the one that broadcasted to every frequency, blue, red, and guard. "Knock it off," I said. My voice was low, terrifyingly calm. "Knock it off. Knock it off." The skies went silent. The exercise stopped instantly. "All aircraft RTB immediately," I ordered. "Viper 1, you are grounded. Get your ass on the deck now." "You can't ground me," Mark argued, his voice shrill. "Dad is watching. I was in control." I said, "Now, Lieutenant," I cut him off, "or I will have the MPs waiting at the ladder to drag you out of that cockpit." I cut the feed. The room was deathly quiet. Mike looked up at me, a mixture of fear and awe on his face. "Major," he asked softly, "what are we doing for tomorrow? The final exercise?" I stared at the blank screen. Mark had almost killed one of my men. He had proven he was dangerous. He wasn't just arrogant, he was a liability. And my father was up there, probably telling the general that it was Spike's fault. I looked at Sarah. "Pull the safety protocols for the final scenario," I said. "Which ones, ma'am?" "All of them," I said. "Prepare Protocol Alpha." Sarah gasped. "Protocol Alpha, ma'am, that activates the entire integrated air defense system, the simulated SAM sites, the electronic jamming, the Golden Horde scenario. That's impossible to survive. It's designed for a full-scale war simulation, not training." "He wants a war?" I said, picking up my broken headset. "He wants to be a hero?" "Fine." I walked toward the door. I needed air. I needed to prepare. "Tomorrow," I said, looking back at my team, "we don't teach. Tomorrow the sky falls. Activate everything. I want the desert to burn." "Yes, ma'am," Mike whispered. I walked out of the cage. Mark thought he was flying against a sister who wanted his respect. He was wrong. Tomorrow, he was flying against Falcon 1. And Falcon 1 didn't have a brother. She only had prey. The sun hadn't even breached the horizon over the Sheep Range Mountains when my phone vibrated against the center console of my truck. It was Zo6Q's hours. The air outside was cool, that deceptive desert chill before the heat turned the tarmac into a frying pan. I stared at the screen. The caller ID read, "Dad." I picked it up, staring at the Nellis flight line through my windshield. The F-16s and F-35s were silhouettes against the purple dawn, sleeping beasts waiting to be woken up. "Major Wyatt," I answered, keeping my voice professional. "Julissa," my father's voice boomed, skipping any pleasantries. He sounded chipper, probably already on his second cup of coffee at the casino hotel. "I'm heading to the observation deck with General Harris in an hour. Big day today, the final sortie." "It is," I said, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. "Mark is flying lead again." "Exactly," Rhett said, his tone shifting to that confidential, patronizing frequency he used when he wanted a favor. Listen, I know yesterday was bumpy. Mark told me about the turbulence. He said that aggressor pilot cut him off. Dangerous flying by your team, Jules. You need to rein them in. I almost laughed. It was a dark, bitter sound that got stuck in my throat. Mark had nearly killed a man, violated a hard deck safety order, and screamed at a superior officer. And in Rhett Wyatt's world, it was my team's fault. It was always someone else's fault. Is that what he told you? I asked. The point is, Rhett bulldozed over me. Today needs to be flawless. The general is deciding on the final roster for deployment. I want you to make sure your brother shines today. Don't throw any curveballs. Give him a standard scenario. Let him look good. For the family name. He wasn't asking me to do my job. He was asking me to fix the game. He was asking me to betray my uniform to prop up his ego. I looked at the black flight bag sitting on the passenger seat. Inside was my helmet. Don't worry, Dad, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I promise you. Today I'm going to give Mark exactly what he deserves. That's my girl, he said, relief washing over his voice. He thought I was capitulating. He thought I was the obedient daughter again. I knew I could count on you. We'll grab dinner after. Steaks are on me. I hung up. I didn't tell him that he wouldn't have an appetite for steak by the time I was done. I walked into the facility, bypassing the coffee mess and heading straight for the server room. Sarah was already there, looking pale. She had seen the flight plan. Boss, she said, standing up as I entered. I did what you asked. I accessed the threat library. Show me, I said, leaning over her shoulder. On the screen was the electronic warfare profile for the day's mission. Usually we projected simple radar signatures, MiG-29s, Su-27s, standard threats. I reprogrammed the DRFM jammers, I said, pointing to the code. We aren't just jamming them today, Sarah. We're gaslighting them. I had designed a ghost protocol. The system would take the radar signals from Mark's F-35, capture them, modify them, and shoot them back at him. His scope would show 4 enemy bandits surrounding him. But when he turned his head to look, the sky would be empty. Then, when he relaxed, the real bandits would strike from his blind spot. This is evil, Major, Sarah whispered, but there was awe in her voice. He trusts his sensors more than his eyes. This will cripple him. That's the point, I said. He thinks the machine makes him a pilot. Today, the machine lies. I left Sarah and marched to the locker room. The smell of stale sweat, boot polish, and Nomex filled the air. My team was already there. 4 of the best pilots in the Air Force, wearing the red-starred patches of the aggressor squadron. Spike was sitting on a bench, lacing up his boots. He looked up when I walked in. There was a bruise on his neck from the G-force of yesterday's near miss. The room went silent. Listen up, I said, standing in the center of the room. Today is Protocol Alpha. But I have specific rules of engagement for the lead blue fighter, Viper 1. The pilots exchanged glances. They hated Mark. They wanted blood. We don't kill him quick, I ordered. If you get a lock on him, don't take the shot immediately. I want you to peel away his wingmen first. Pick them off one by one. Force him to watch his team die. Isolate him. We're going to leave him all alone out there, Spike said, a grim smile forming. Exactly, I nodded. I want him stranded in the middle of the desert with 4 bandits circling him. I want him to feel the panic. I want him to understand that without a team, he is nothing. And who takes the kill shot, boss? Spike asked. You want me to finish him. I shook my head. I walked over to my locker, the one I hadn't opened in 3 years. I spun the combination lock. Clack, clack, clack. No, I said, pulling the metal door open. You just heard the sheep. The wolf is eating today. Inside the locker hung my G-suit. It was olive drab, heavy with zippers and air bladders designed to squeeze my legs and keep the blood in my brain during high G maneuvers. Next to it was my helmet, the visor dark and scratched from 1,000 hours of combat training. I took off my service uniform jacket. I unbuttoned my shirt. I stepped into the G-suit, the familiar sound of heavy zippers closing around my legs, feeling like I was putting on armor. I tightened the Velcro straps around my waist. I pulled on my combat boots, tying the laces tight enough to cut circulation. For the last 2 weeks, I had been the voice in their ear. I had been the paper pusher my brother mocked. I had been the dutiful daughter sitting in the dark. Not today. I grabbed my helmet bag and turned to my team. They were staring at me. They had never seen me suit up. They knew me as the strategist, the architect. They had forgotten that before I was a commander, I was a killer in the cockpit. "Let's go," I said. I pushed open the heavy steel doors and stepped out onto the flight line. The heat hit me instantly, a wall of dry, dusty air. The sound was deafening. The whine of auxiliary power units, the roar of jet engines turning over, the smell of burnt kerosene. There it was. My jet. An F-16C Block 30. But it wasn't painted in the standard Air Force gray. It was painted in the Wraith scheme, black and dark blue splinter camouflage, designed to mimic the Russian Su-57. It looked aggressive. It looked mean. I walked around the aircraft, running my hand along the cold metal of the leading edge flap. I checked the landing gear. I checked the missiles, inert training rounds, but they would register as real kills in the computer. I climbed the ladder. The cockpit was tight, smelling of old sweat and avionics. I strapped in, connecting my oxygen hose, plugging in my comms cord. I lowered the canopy. The world outside became muffled, distant. "Ground, this is Falcon 1, I said into my mask. My voice sounded different in the enclosed space. It sounded like judgment. "Radio check." "Loud and clear, Falcon 1, the tower responded. "You are cleared for engine start." I flipped the switches. The engine behind me whined, then roared to life, a tiger waking up. The entire airframe vibrated, shaking my bones. I looked at the observation deck tower in the distance. I knew my father was up there, expecting to see his son triumph. I pushed the throttle forward. The black jet lurched onto the taxiway. Mark was already up there, waiting in the sky. He thought he was the main character of this movie. He didn't realize the director had just stepped onto the set. "Falcon flight," I commanded. "Check in. 2, 3, 4. "Falcon 1 is rolling," I said. "Let's go hunting." The air at 20,000 feet was thin and cold, but inside the cockpit of Viper 1, Mark Wyatt was sweating through his flight suit. "Viper 2, support. I have 4 bandits on my nose. I need cover." Mark screamed into his oxygen mask. Static hissed back at him. "Viper 2 is down, lead. I was splashed 5 minutes ago." "Viper 3, where are you?" "Dead, Viper 1. They picked us off while you were chasing that Phantom Echo." Mark was alone. I watched him from 2 miles back, sitting comfortably in the shadow of his vertical stabilizer. I was flying my black F-16 Aggressor, painted to look like a Russian ghost. My radar was off. My heat signature was masked by the sun. To him, I didn't exist. But on his sophisticated $40 million helmet display, he was seeing nightmares. My ghost protocol was working perfectly. His radar was painting 4 enemy aircraft circling him, locking onto him, taunting him. He was yanking his stick left and right, trying to dodge missiles that weren't there, burning fuel, bleeding energy, panic setting in like a virus. "My sensors are glitching," Mark yelled, his voice cracking. "I can't get a lock. They're everywhere." He wasn't fighting pilots. He was fighting his own reliance on the machine. He was fighting the arrogance that told him technology could replace discipline. "Spike," I keyed my internal mic. "Status?" "He's all yours, Falcon 1. Spike replied from the ground, having ejected virtually 10 minutes ago. "The sheep is isolated, the wolf is cleared hot." I pushed my throttle forward. My F-16 surged, the GE engine roaring as I closed the distance. I slid effortlessly into the control zone behind Mark, the lethal cone where I could fire at will, and he couldn't do a thing about it. I armed my simulated AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles. A high-pitched growl filled my headset. The tone, the sound of death. I could have shot him silently. I could have just logged the kill and gone home. But this lesson required a personal touch. I reached for the comm switch and flipped to the guard frequency. Check 6, Lieutenant. In front of me, I saw Mark's F-35 violently bank to the right as he frantically twisted his head around. He looked back. He saw me. He saw the black jet filling his rearview mirrors, sitting right on his tail. Inescapable, inevitable. Fox 2, I said calmly. Kill Viper 1. The computer registered the shot. Mark's cockpit would be flashing red. Kill removal. His systems would shut down combat mode. He was a flying brick. That's a kill, the AWACS controller confirmed over the radio. Viper 1 is splashed. Exercise terminated. All players, knock it off. RTB. Mark didn't say a word. For the first time in his life, he was silent. 2 hours later, the main auditorium at Nellis was packed. The air was thick with the smell of dried sweat, adrenaline, and stale coffee. Every pilot from Red and Blue Forces was there. In the front row sat the brass, General Harris, flanked by the safety board officers, and my father, Colonel Rhett Wyatt. Mark sat at the table on the stage, looking small. He was still wearing his G-suit, his hair matted with sweat. He looked at Dad, silently begging for a lifeline. Dad just stared straight ahead, his jaw set in stone. I walked up to the podium. The room went dead silent. I plugged my data drive into the console. The massive screen behind me lit up. Let's review the tape, I said. My voice wasn't angry. It was clinical. It was the voice of a coroner explaining a cause of death. The screen showed the HUD, heads-up display, footage from Mark's jet. It was a humiliating montage. It showed him chasing ghost signals. It showed him abandoning his wingmen. It showed him burning through his fuel reserves in panic. At 08:15, I said, using a laser pointer to circle the data block, Lieutenant Wyatt broke formation to pursue a false radar signature. In doing so, he left his wingman, Viper 2, exposed to a flank attack. Viper 2 died 60 seconds later. Mark shifted in his seat. My radar was jammed, he mumbled. The system was giving me false positives. It was a technical glitch. It wasn't a glitch, I said, cutting him off. It was a test of situational awareness. You trusted the screen instead of looking out the window. I clicked the remote. The video advanced. At 08:22, Lieutenant Wyatt violated the hard deck altitude restriction for the second day in a row while attempting to evade a missile that wasn't there. The room murmured. A hard deck violation was serious. 2 in a row was negligence. And finally, I clicked to the last clip. It showed my black F-16 sitting behind him for a full 45 seconds while he flailed at phantoms. At 08:30, the aggressor lead, myself, achieved a guns tracking solution and a Fox 2 missile lock. I sat on your 6 o'clock for nearly a minute, Lieutenant. You never checked. You never cleared your tail. I turned off the screen. The darkness seemed to swallow Mark whole. The data doesn't lie, I said, looking directly at General Harris, then shifting my gaze to my father. Lieutenant Wyatt died 4 times in 20 minutes. He got his entire flight killed. He prioritized his own score over the mission and the safety of his team. In a real war, those 4 pilots don't come home to their families, because their leader wanted to be a hero. I placed the remote on the podium. The sound echoed like a gavel strike. He's a danger to himself and everyone in the air with him. Mark stood up, his face red. This was a setup. She rigged the simulation. Dad, tell them. She rigged it. Rhett Wyatt didn't move. He didn't look at Mark. He looked at the floor, the weight of the public humiliation crushing the fantasy he had built around his son. General Harris leaned forward. He didn't look at Mark either. He looked at the safety officer, Colonel Peterson. Colonel? The general asked. Colonel Peterson stood up. He was a by-the-book officer who hated cowboys. I've seen enough, Peterson said. Lieutenant Wyatt, based on the telemetry data and the gross violations of safety protocols. Peterson paused, letting the words hang in the air. Your flight status is revoked effectively immediately pending a flight evaluation board. You are grounded. Hand over your wings. Mark froze. He looked at our father again. Dad? Rhett finally looked up. His eyes were empty. He didn't see the golden boy anymore. He saw a liability. He saw his own ego shattering. He didn't say a word. He just turned his head away. Mark slumped back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. The room was silent, save for the hum of the projector cooling down. I gathered my papers and walked off the stage. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel happy. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction. The kind you feel when you finally balance a ledger that has been in the red for 30 years. Justice had been served. And it tasted like cold steel. The heavy steel doors of the briefing room clicked shut behind me, sealing in the cool, air-conditioned silence of the debrief. I stepped out into the Nevada afternoon, and the heat hit me like a physical blow. It was 110 degrees on the asphalt, the kind of dry, suffocating heat that bakes the moisture right out of your skin. The air shimmered above the rows of parked cars, distorting the horizon. I walked toward my truck, my boots crunching on the gravel. I felt drained. Not the good kind of tired you feel after a long run or a successful mission, but the deep, bone-weary exhaustion that comes from fighting a war that should never have existed. I just wanted to go home, take a shower, and wash the day off. But as I rounded the corner of the lot, I saw him. Rhett Wyatt was leaning against the hood of my pickup truck. He was still wearing his immaculate blazer, but the heat had finally gotten to him. Sweat was beading on his forehead, and his face was flushed a dangerous shade of crimson. He wasn't pacing, he was waiting. Like a predator waiting for the prey to break cover. I slowed my pace, but I didn't stop. I put my sunglasses on, shielding my eyes. It was a small barrier, but it was mine. "You look happy," Rhett spat out as I got within earshot. He pushed himself off the hood of my truck, blocking the driver's side door. "I hope you're proud of yourself." I stopped 3 feet away from him. "I'm not happy, Dad. And I'm not proud. I'm just doing my job." "Your job," he laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Your job was to support your brother. Your job was to help him secure his legacy. Instead, you humiliated him. You humiliated me." He took a step closer, invading my personal space. His finger jabbed the air toward the building behind us. "You rigged that simulation, Jalissa. Don't lie to me. I saw what you did. You programmed those ghosts. You set him up to fail because you couldn't stand seeing him succeed. You're jealous. You've always been jealous of him because he's the natural, and you're just you." I looked at this man I had spent 32 years trying to impress. This man whose approval I had chased across 3 continents and through 2 combat tours. And suddenly, looking at him sweating in the parking lot, ranting about his own ego while his son's career lay in ruins, the illusion finally shattered. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt nothing. A verse from the Bible floated into my mind, clear as a bell. Matthew 7:6. "Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces." For years, I had been throwing my pearls, my achievements, my love, my loyalty, at his feet, and he had trampled them every single time. It wasn't because I wasn't good enough. It was because he didn't know the value of pearls. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of hot tar and sagebrush. "I didn't humiliate him, Dad," I said, my voice steady and low. "You did." "Excuse me?" he sputtered, his eyes bulging. "You humiliated him by making him believe he didn't have to work for anything," I continued, cutting him off. "You gave him a watch instead of a work ethic. You taught him that rules were for other people. And today, the real world finally hit him." "He's a Wyatt," Rhett shouted. He deserves to be alive," I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. The force of it made him flinch. "Do you have any idea what happened up there? He died 4 times, Dad. 4 times. If those were real missiles, if that was a real war over the Pacific or the Middle East, Mark wouldn't be sitting in a debriefing room right now." I stepped closer to him, removing my sunglasses so he could see the absolute conviction in my eyes. If I hadn't taught him this lesson today, if I had let him pass and deploy, you wouldn't be buying him a celebratory steak dinner tonight. You would be waiting on your front porch for a black sedan to pull up. You would be waiting for two officers in dress blues to knock on your door and hand you a folded flag. Rhett froze. The color drained from his face. In the military community, the folded flag is the ultimate silencer. It is the symbol of the final sacrifice. I saved his life today, I whispered fiercely. I grounded him so you wouldn't have to bury him. And instead of thanking me, you're standing here worrying about your reputation. Rhett opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked like a fish gasping for air. For a split second, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. But then, the narcissism kicked back in. The wall went back up. He couldn't accept that he was wrong. He couldn't accept that his golden boy was flawed. You're ungrateful, he muttered, looking away, unable to meet my gaze. After everything I provided for you, I shook my head slowly. You provided a roof, Dad. But you never provided a home. I walked around him and opened the door to my truck. I climbed into the cab, the heat inside baking me, but I didn't care. I started the engine. Rhett banged his hand on the window frame. Where are you going? We aren't done. You need to fix this. You need to go back in there and tell General Harris it was a system error. I rolled down the window, just an inch. The air conditioning blasted cold air against my face, a sharp contrast to the heat radiating off him. I'm done fixing your mistakes, Dad, I said. And I'm done apologizing for my success. If you drive away, he threatened, pointing a shaking finger at me, don't expect a seat at Thanksgiving. Don't expect anything from me. I haven't expected anything from you since I was 10 years old, I said. Do not call me Dad. Do not call me until you learn how to respect this uniform. And the woman wearing it. I didn't wait for his response. I shifted the truck into drive and peeled out of the parking spot. I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. Rhett Wyatt was standing alone in the middle of the empty lot, small and shrinking against the vast, indifferent desert landscape. He looked like a man who had built a castle out of sand, and the tide had finally come in. I turned onto the main road, the base disappearing behind me. I reached over and turned off my phone. Silence filled the cab. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The fallout was swift, just as I knew it would be. Mark didn't get kicked out of the Air Force. The Wyatt name still carried enough weight to prevent a dishonorable discharge, and Dad pulled every string he had left to save face. But Mark's days as a fighter pilot were over. The Flight Evaluation Board reviewed my tapes. They saw the negligence. They saw the danger. They stripped him of his flight status permanently. 2 days later, I was walking through the administrative wing of the base HQ to file my final report. I turned a corner and nearly collided with a young officer pushing a heavy cart loaded with boxes of printer paper and toner cartridges. It was Mark. He was wearing his service dress uniform, but the pilot wings were gone from his chest. He looked tired. The swagger was gone. The hotshot smile was gone. He was now a logistics officer, a supply jockey, a paper pusher. He stopped the cart. He looked up and saw me. For a moment, I thought he might yell. I thought he might repeat Dad's accusations, but he didn't. He looked at the Major's oak leaves on my shoulders. Then he looked at the boxes of paper he was pushing, the very job he had mocked me for having just 2 weeks ago. The irony hung in the air, heavy and thick. Mark's face flushed red. He didn't say a word. He just lowered his head, eyes fixing on the linoleum floor, and pushed his cart past me. The wheels squeaked. A sharp, annoying sound that faded as he disappeared down the long, fluorescent-lit hallway. I didn't stop him. I didn't gloat. I didn't say, I told you so. I just kept walking. I had a squadron to command. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking in anyone's shadow. I was walking in my own light. 1 year. It is strange how time works. When you are suffering, when you are the invisible girl standing in the corner of a crowded room, time drags. It feels like wading through wet concrete. But when you are flying, when you are finally, truly free, time moves like an F-16 in full afterburner. It blurs. I stood by the large tempered glass window of my office, looking out at the shimmering heat of the Nellis Air Force Base flight line. The view was magnificent. From here, I could see everything. I could see the maintenance crews prepping the jets, the fuel trucks weaving in and out, and the pilots walking toward their aircraft with that distinct, heavy-footed swagger. I took a sip of my coffee. It wasn't the burnt, sludge-like liquid from the briefing room pot anymore. It was a fresh brew from the machine in the corner of my office. My office. I turned back to my desk. A mahogany nameplate sat on the edge, catching the afternoon sun. It didn't say assistant or admin. It read, Major Jalissa Wyatt, Commander, 64th Aggressor Squadron. A lot had changed in 12 months. After the red flag incident, as it was now whispered about in the officers' club, General Harris didn't just promote me, he gave me the keys to the kingdom. He put me in charge of the entire opposing force program. I wasn't just designing scenarios in a dark vault anymore, I was leading the wolves. My door was open. Outside in the bustling bullpen, I could hear Spike laughing with a new transfer pilot, probably retelling the story of how he almost died and how his boss saved him. The atmosphere wasn't toxic. It wasn't competitive in that nasty, cutthroat way it used to be. It was sharp. It was professional. It was a family. I sat down in my leather chair and woke up my computer monitor. I had a stack of performance evaluations to sign and a budget meeting with the Pentagon in an hour. But first, I had to clear my inbox. I scrolled through the usual traffic. Logistics reports, weather updates, training schedules, and then I stopped. My finger hovered over the mouse. There, buried between a memo about runway maintenance and a request for leave, was a name I hadn't seen pop up on my screen in exactly 365 days. Sender, Rhett Wyatt. Subject, just checking in. My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. That panic response, conditioned into me since childhood, was gone. Instead, I felt a strange, detached curiosity. It was like looking at a specimen in a jar. I clicked open the email. Julissa, I hope this email finds you well. I heard through the grapevine that you made major. Congratulations. That's a big step. Things here are quiet. The house feels empty. Your stepmother sends her love. Look, I'm writing because I'm in a bit of a bind, and I thought, given your new position, you might have some pull. Mark is having a hard time in logistics. The work doesn't suit him. He's miserable, Jules. I know there was friction between you two, but he's still your brother. There's a slot opening up for a transport pilot on a C-130 cargo run out of Ramstein. It's not fighters, but it's flying. If you could put in a good word with General Harris, maybe smooth things over, I think it would be a great fresh start for him. We should talk. It's been too long. Let's bury the hatchet. We're family, after all. Best. Dad. I leaned back in my chair, reading the words again. It was a masterclass in narcissism. No apology, no acknowledgement of the screaming match in the parking lot. No. I'm sorry I told you that you were a failure. Just a casual congratulations, followed immediately by a request for a favor. He called his son's near-death experience and gross negligence friction. He called my year of silence too long. He hadn't changed, not one bit. He was still trying to use me to fix the golden child. He still thought that family was a magic word that erased years of emotional neglect. For a moment, the 10-year-old girl inside me woke up. She wanted to reply. She wanted to type out a furious paragraph detailing every hurt, every slight, every birthday he missed, every time he looked at me with disappointment. She wanted to scream, "Why do you only call when you need something?" But the major silenced her. The major knew better. I knew that if I replied, even if it was to say no, he would take it as an opening. He would argue. He would gaslight. He would drag me back into the mud. Narcissists don't care about negative attention. They just crave attention. They feed on the engagement. I looked at the options on my screen. Reply, all, delete. I moved the cursor to delete. But then I paused. Deleting it felt like hiding. It felt like I was afraid of the email, afraid of having it in my history. I moved the cursor to the right. Archive. To archive something means you aren't destroying it, but you are removing it from your active life. You are filing it away in a dusty cabinet in the basement. It exists, but it no longer has the power to clutter your daily workspace. It is a part of history, not the present. I clicked archive. The email vanished from my inbox. The screen was clean. I took a deep breath, and for the first time, I felt the air fill my lungs completely. I forgave myself in that moment. I forgave myself for not being the daughter he wanted. I forgave myself for not being able to save Mark. I forgave myself for walking away. I wasn't their savior. I was just Julissa. I stood up, grabbed my flight cap, and walked out of the office. I passed Sarah's desk. "Heading out to the line, boss?" she asked, looking up from her screens. "Yeah," I smiled. "I need some fresh air." I walked out of the air-conditioned building and into the heat. The sun was beginning to dip low, painting the Nevada sky in streaks of violent orange and bruised purple. It was the golden hour. The sound hit me first, the roar of afterburners tearing through the atmosphere. I looked up. A flight of 2 F-16s, painted in the black and blue wraith scheme of my squadron, was rotating off the runway. They pulled vertical, climbing straight into the sun, leaving twin trails of white vapor behind them. They looked like birds of prey. They looked dangerous and beautiful. I watched them climb until they were just specks against the vastness of the sky. My father used to tell me the story of the phoenix, the bird that burns and rises from the ashes. He told it to Mark, saying it represented resilience. He never told it to me. He didn't think I had any fire in me. He was wrong. I didn't need his fire. I had built my own. I had burned down the life they tried to force me into, the life of a secretary, of a spectator, of a disappointment. And I had risen from those ashes not as a daughter, but as a commander. The wind whipped at my hair, smelling of jet fuel and sage. I closed my eyes and listened to the roar of the engines. It was the sound of my heartbeat. It was the sound of my life. I was 33 years old. I was alone in the traditional sense, no parents calling to check on me, no brother to share holidays with. But standing there on the tarmac, surrounded by the thunder of freedom, I had never felt less lonely. I opened my eyes and looked at the horizon, where the mountains met the sky. "I am Julissa Wyatt," I whispered to the wind. "And I am not his daughter anymore." I watched the jets disappear into the clouds. I am Falcon 1. I turned around and walked back toward the hangar, ready for the next mission. The sky was wide open, and for the first time, it was all mine. Hitting that archive button was the hardest maneuver I ever executed, harder than any dogfight. But sometimes you have to eject from a toxic situation to save your own life. If my story resonated with you, if you are currently fighting to find your own sky away from someone else's shadow, I want you to know, you are cleared for takeoff. Please hit that like button if you believe in choosing peace over ego. And make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can keep sharing stories of resilience together. In the comments below, tell me, have you ever had to archive a family member to save yourself? I'll be reading your stories. This is Falcon 1, signing off.